Hi, I'm Justin Crosby from TellyCast, the TV industry podcast show. In this week's show, I caught up with broadcaster, journalist, and TV producer Richard Hammond to talk about his career, Top Gear, the Grand Tour, and his production company, Chimp Productions. But before we get into the interview, let's take a quick look at a clip from Richard and Chimp's latest production for Amazon Prime Video, The Great Escapists. And if you want to hear the full podcast episode, just click on the link below.
I'm pulling it to the start line because we could only salvage so much fuel. And once it's gone, Clarkson.
What the hell is that?
That's Clarkson, but what the hell is that?
This is my screw tank, and you're screwed.
How did you make it all? Where did you get these from?
So these are the intakes from the ship. The engine is from the generator. I'm using hydraulic motors from the net hoists. But wait till you see it in action.
That's ridiculous. How much does it weigh?
I have no idea. I'm sure a lot. But the whole point of this is gonna be pulling power, right? So at first I thought maybe I'll make some kind of like tank tracks, but I didn't have anything strong enough to make my tracks. So I ended up going with helixes.
So that's these spirally things down the side.
They're not spirals, they're helixes. A helix is actually one of mankind's greatest inventions. It takes a small turning force and turns it into a large forward thrusting force.
What are you gonna do? Tunnel your way off the island with it? Does it?
No, these will allow me to actually push through the sand and get across the finish line before you.
You know you're mad, don't you? Just saying.
So my first guest on this week's show is journalist, TV presenter, and TV producer, Richard Hammond. Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
I like the intro. It makes me sound interesting now. I got all those things rather than just that little bloke off the car show that used to be. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll run with
Well, no, absolutely. It's you're very welcome. How's lockdown treating you?
Well, it's not fun. From a work point of view, it's kind of limiting, as it is for all of us. So, yeah, there's good days and there's bad days, aren't there?
Yeah, that's right. And I
have just spent 25 years on the road, so it is quite a surprise, having lived out of a suitcase for 25 years, to be in this. I haven't been in the same place for a year, forever.
Yeah.
So that's quite.
It's enforced, though. I mean, does that make it more difficult?
No, it actually makes it an awful lot easier because you think, well, I've just got to make the best of this, haven't I? Plus, I mean, I live out here in the country, which is great, but there are trees that blossom here that I had never seen in blossom until last year, the first lockdown, when they came and, oh, look, it's all covered in pink. Look at that. I didn't know it did that. So, yeah, that's been a bit of a joy, really.
And
but
but
good thing.
How long do you usually spend away from home then, out of a regular year?
Oh, tens and tens and tens of weeks. Yeah, because making all the shows I make seem to involve, whether it's Top Gear latterly or Grand Tour more recently, big for Discovery last year. I began last year with 7 weeks away on a deserted island off Panama, making The Great Escapists for Amazon. And prior to that, all the shit things I've done, Engineering Connections, I mean, Miracles of Nature, all of those shows involve getting on an airplane and going somewhere else.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, I'd love to talk to you about your career, and starting at the beginning. And TellyCast is all about the business of TV and the people who work in it. So you've been a TV presenter for over 20 years now. How did you get your first presenter job?
Well, I've been a broadcaster for 33 years. I started at BBC Radio York 1988, came straight out of art college, went straight into radio, which tells you how good I was.
Right.
Actually wanted to be a photographer as well, so I really completely missed it. And that gave me a grounding, yes, in presentation, which I loved. I love broadcasting, and live radio still is just so exciting as a presenter, but also production, because of course there wasn't a lot of budget in local radio in 1988. So if you were making a 4-hour show, you had to find 4 hours worth of material. And when the BBC kindly said, I know, let's go all speech, it was 75-25 when I started. They then said, no, let's go all speech. So at that point, 4 hours meant you had to fill 4 hours. And
Yeah.
there was no resources. You had to have it all jacked up, set up, organized, sit down, begin the show. If it was all speech, you'd have somebody the other side of the glass to make the calls, but you'd have had to set it up. So it gave me a feel for the business of keeping the needles moving.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
And from there,
production, essentially.
yeah, absolutely. And then the move to TV. I mean, the first thing I ever hosted was Children in Need, the local opt-in out of Blackpool in it's about 90, very early 90s, 1, 2. But then I was basically starving to death. I tried everything. I always dreamed of having my own production company is what I wanted to do, but it's not easy. Little lad from the north. And then eventually I bailed out of radio entirely because I was hungry. But I thought if I get a job at in one of the car manufacturers in their press office, I'll get to know the editors of all the TV shows about cars, and cars were my big passion. Maybe something could happen. So I did. I applied for and eventually got a job. Took that up with Renault UK, based in Denham, working in the press office. I was the worst press officer in. That's another interview. I was bad at that. But I did. I got to know a guy called Pete Baker at Granada Men and Motors, very early digital channel.
Yeah.
And it was sort of cars up to about 9 o'clock and then topless darts after that. He did the car stuff. And he said to me, well, I can't guarantee it, but you'll maybe get a day a week, maybe. I did an audition for him when I did a review of my own company car, which is a Renault Laguna. And so, all right, well, I'll do it. So I bailed, gave up my only ever proper job, my only ever salary in 33 years of work, and went back into media and started there. And stuck with that for 7, 8 years. And by the end of that, I was doing quite a lot with ITV, a lot of live stuff, non-motoring shows. And then eventually the Top Gear audition came along and on you go.
Yeah. And that was 2002. You joined the Top Gear team.
Yes, when we started the new version, yeah.
Yeah. That was clearly a life-changing event.
Although we didn't know. I mean, to be fair, like anybody else, I mean, we've all started shows. And Top Gear had been off the air for a long time, and we thought, well, I honestly thought it's great. It's a national show, brilliant, and maybe I'll get a couple of seasons out of it, and then move on to something else. I didn't think I'd do it for 20 years. We got carried away.
Yeah. And how did you get on initially with Jeremy Clarkson and James May? I mean, did you?
James May wasn't there initially. But the first season, a guy called Jason Dorr, from a presenting point of view, it was us three. And it was, I mean, I went for the audition. I had to do a sort of car review on a car that they just gave me. So I had to talk around it, piece to camera. Well, that wasn't difficult. Say words, face that thing. I had to do a little bit of sort of imaginary news type bit with Jeremy for a bit of banter. And that was sort of it for the audition. I do remember driving home thinking, what an amazing bunch of folk. I mean, I met Andy Willman, who's the exec, and really the biggest part of it, if we're honest. The one of I always think of it as the four people really at the center of it, and he's the one we couldn't do it without. We could do it without me, do it without James at a push, even do it without Jeremy, but you couldn't do it without Willman. And I just thought, well, he's amazing. And Richard Porter, actually, scriptwriter forever, he was there. And I remember driving home thinking, well, I'm not going to get it, obviously, but oh God, what an amazing team, what an amazing show they're going to make. So I was very surprised and quite pleased when the phone rang and they gave me the job.
Yeah. Well, we'll come on to talk a bit more about Top Gear in a second, but just looking at those list of TV shows, that some of which you mentioned, but the shows that you've presented outside of Top Gear and the Grand Tour, those include Brainiac, Science Abuse, The 5 O'Clock Show, Petrol Heads, Engineering Connections, Invisible Worlds, Crash Course, as well as Total Wipeout, Planet Earth Live, and of course your new series on Amazon Prime, The Great Escapists.
And big for Discovery.
Yeah.
It's been busy. I mean, I've been doing stuff, but you've got to keep busy, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, science, engineering, and cars clearly at the center of what you do. But are there any other areas of TV that you're keen to tackle?
as a producer and with my fledgling little production company, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love it as a presenter. I love science and engineering because I'm an old school presenter, and I'm unashamedly so. I wouldn't give myself a job now, but I kind of am in the sense that I'm not a personality led presenter. I don't. I've no desire to go on screen and say, "Hey, look how much I know about this," or "Look how funny I can be about this." That's not my role. My role is to say, "Look, isn't this amazing?" And if I tell you this about it, it's even more amazing. I'm one of the rack of tools, along with director, sound, camera, editor, everything else that goes into making a show. And I want to present the content to you, not my take on it. So I am quite old-fashioned in that way as a presenter. And I love engineering as a subject and physics. I mean, I did Blast Lab. There was a sort of kids pop science show, and I loved doing it because I like saying about a subject that, look, you don't have to be a scientist to understand and appreciate this. Especially right now, science and engineering are literally saving the world. So we need more scientists and engineers, but you don't have to be one to appreciate and understand it and celebrate it. It's almost giving people the right to say, look, we did a show called Miracles of Nature. I won the Jackson Hole, with a guy called Graham Booth, fabulous bloke, worked with him a lot. And that was about biomimetics, effectively. And some of it's pretty heavy, but it kind of isn't when you look into it. If you've got a human brain, you can understand it.
Yeah.
I'm also a big believer when it comes to subject areas. The divisions between them, they're an invention. They were invented around about the time education was proliferating and intensifying, and we needed to find ways of being able to examine how people were doing. And the logical way to do that is to break it into subjects. But that's not how the world actually works. I mean, if you think of I don't know, the process of digestion, it's not purely a chem. You can't just say that's only chemistry. Physics isn't allowed in this because there is
Yeah.
science is far broader, as is music, art. I mean, Da Vinci would rather give the lie to the idea that you can only do one thing, wouldn't he? Because you can do anything: science, art,
Yeah.
language. It's all human stuff, isn't it? And I'm a big fan, and I think it's a big thing that TV can do really effectively is just say, "Hey, look at this! Isn't it amazing?" And if I put it into context for you, isn't it even more amazing? And yeah, of course we can understand it.
Yeah. Now, before we move on to Top Gear and the Grand Tour and Chimp Productions, your business, I've just got to ask you about Evil Knievel.
Oh,
Now,
that was fun.
you got to meet Evil Knievel
Yeah,
and make a show. What was that like?
it was the last show featuring him, actually, as far as I know. He died very shortly after. It was amazing. And a guy called Nigel Simpkiss, who was a long-time director on Top Gear, I asked him to direct it with me. And I remember he came round to my little London flat, and I was hopping up and down, really excited. Oh, Nigel, this is such an opportunity. We've got incredible access to the man. And let's not forget, this was one of the world's first global brands centered on one person. It's the most incredible story. We've got amazing access. I want to make the definitive, the most authoritative documentary on the man that'll ever have been made. And he nodded and thought for a bit and said, I'd quite like to make the worst. So he absolutely burst my bubble. That little bit of pomposity in me, he saw straight through the brummie and thought, hang on a minute. And he was completely right. And because of that, we ended up with my favorite sequence in that film was he was proving ever more elusive as filming went on. And when you're making something, you've got access. And it goes one of two ways. Either you get to whatever it is, and I've made a lot of shows based around big structures or what have you, access-based programming. You get there, and quite often, 99% of the time, you actually get more access than was discussed. They let you go further because you've got people on the ground and they're excited. And it doesn't matter what the PR and the bosses said a year ago when you were setting it up. They want to show you how they're going to blow up this wall in this mine or make this bridge stand up. They're really excited. Or it goes the other way and the access starts to get away from you. And that's what sort of happened here. Evil Knievel was very unwell by then anyway. And he'd had a number of accidents in his life.
Yeah.
He was slowly retreating from us. And so my favorite scene was chasing him. We had a high-speed chase across a golf course in a golf buggy with him in the golf buggy. And this was to get an interview with a man racing up. It was the best bit of the show for me. It was just fabulous. Rather than... I'm a big, just in purely programming terms, I love bursting that bubble, that sort of faux reverence, that pomposity. I love if the stuff you've got to make a program about is interesting and powerful and it will chime with people, then it will. You don't need to be, oh, speaking in that voice. This is it. Because you know what? Just get on with it, deliver the facts. So I really enjoyed that we could do that with it, have a different approach. And largely thanks to Nigel for that.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen it, so but I desperately want to. So I'm gonna find out where I can access that, and I'll put a link in the episode description. If I find it, then I'd love to sort of have a little feature on that on the episode.
Yeah, do it again.
But coming back to Top Gear, so you worked through Top Gear for a number of years. At its peak, 6 million viewers on BBC Two. Global audience of 350 million in 214 countries, earning 50 million pounds a year for BBC Worldwide, when 50 million pounds a year was a lot of money. Now, I don't want to go into the detail of Jeremy Clarkson's sacking, but that's obviously been gone over many times.
And just I'm only note that it wasn't a sacking; it was a not renewing a contract.
Right.
It is different. I mean, it is a subtle difference, and I think it was seen as that. But yes, let's not rake it over because it gets boring.
Yeah. But I mean, there had been a number of press incidents leading up to that. And do you think it was only a matter of time until you'd finally fall out with the BBC?
No, the BBC were very accommodating. They didn't interfere. They were very good at thinking, well, there's a little unit here that makes this show. And it comes out of them, so let's leave them to it. I think it depends where you work in the industry, but if you're a program maker, and I'm very much at the coalface, I'm not trying to big it up. Oh, it's a tough job. It's not. It's a brilliant job. I love it. That's why I've done it for decades. But I belong on the coalface, as do those around me now and when we were making Top Gear. So they were very good at thinking, well, we'll just let them go run loose in the wild and do what they do.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was inevitable. I don't know. I'm listen. I don't want to get drawn into raking over something that's happened.
Yeah. I mean, do you a big part of Top Gear was the live shows as well? These like almost live concert experiences. Do you miss those?
They were amazing. They were incredible fun. I was talking to Chris Hughes, actually, the guy at Brand Events, the company because they were a commercial venture together with BBC Worldwide. So it's sort of separate from BBC as we knew it from our office in White City, but it was more World City and the filthy money grubbing side of it, which meant it was great because we could go berserk. So it was really exciting. It was fabulous fun and a huge privilege to walk out on stage. We were standing waiting to go on. We played the National Stadium in Poland, in Warsaw. There's 52 or 62,000 people there. And we were backstage waiting to go on to start this show. And it was us stunt driving and being ridiculous, doing the show, but live. Yeah. And I remember saying to the other two, lads, have any three guys with less talent ever gone out in front of more people? No. So it was an incredible privilege and an absolute joy to get to do. I'm a very, very lucky boy for that, to get to do sort of rock and roll tours, to play the Coca-Cola Dome, to play, huge stadia across the world. Australia, South Africa, Hong Kong, Sydney. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a band, though, wasn't it? I mean, it was almost like, it's like Metallica going on tour with these, stunts and
we'd sometimes follow the same bands round as well. You'd go and there'd be a band that had just been playing and their posters would be coming down and ours would be going up. It was an incredible experience and one of those amazing surprises that this industry can throw at us all, that you realise, wait a minute. But I mean, it again depends where you work in the business, but assuming you manage to get out of the office occasionally and see what's going on at the coalface, you'll know that feeling when you go away on holiday yourself as like a real person and you look at the big tower or the incredible underwater glass tunnel or the big crane and you think, oh, I want to go up there. And then you realize, oh no, I can't. But actually in our working lives, because of what we do, we get access to some incredible places. And the last last year I delivered, Chimp delivered big to Discovery, and the world's biggest freight ship, finding yourself actually clamoring about in the crankcase of it, which I was briefly. I mean, you don't normally get to do that.
Yeah.
Standing on the tallest dock cranes in the world, standing on the tallest, thinnest dam, going inside and underneath. All of these things that you don't normally get to do, but we do because we don't work. We're in
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah. Well, I mean, moving on with the Grand Tour then.
Yeah.
Massive story in world TV when you signed with Amazon. Massive shift for them as well.
Yeah.
Obviously gave you so much more freedom, and that was something that
We can't tell them. I mean, they gave us a lot of freedom. Amazon were very clever. For a start, we were looking around, and certainly I was casting around early on, thinking, right, we need to find a home where we are worth more than the sum of our parts. Hideous thought, though that is. And therefore, it needs to be somewhere where our reach into territories, Australia, Germany, weirdly, South Africa, is of value. And Amazon at that time were gearing up. Prime Video was moving out into territories. They wanted a calling card in all of those territories, which is why we were valued to them, because we could put them quickly in those areas. But they had the sense from day one to say, okay, these guys have got something works. And again, I always include Wilman up front, center first. Together, they make something, and clearly it resonates because it's got a big audience. So why would we interfere? So they were very, very good, and have retained that, maintained that ever since. They simply don't interfere. Because why would you? It'd be like spending a lot of, I'm going to make a car analogy. Punch me if you need to. But it would be like spending a lot of money on a very expensive, finely tuned car and then fiddling about with it yourself. Why? They know more. This is when people buy sports motorcycles and try and set the suspension up themselves and ruin it and take it back to be put back to standard, because you know what? They know more about it. And Amazon had the sense to realize we knew more about making our show than they did, so leave us to it. As long as we don't, broach the bounds of decency and legality.
Yeah. But I mean, not having the BBC there, did it remove something to rub up against a little bit?
No, because we put Amazon in the same role. It doesn't. I think it was something that was discussed by us, but no. Again, that's a card you can play very easily. We don't do it as much, and I don't think that's because we feel there isn't something to push against. It doesn't feel like that's the right way to go editorially anymore. If we do it less than we did at the BBC, there's still a fine old tradition of knocking the BBC when you're making a show for the BBC. If you're not biting the hand that feeds you, you're doing it wrong. Now that goes back to the 50s and 60s, really, 60s, 70s in terms of programming. But as a gag, that was the gag. We don't have any money. So, and they're telling us we can't do this. That didn't feel so much like the right thing to do with a big SVOD when, everybody knows Amazon are not shy of money. So we can't say, oh, we've had to do this the cheap way, and oh no, they won't let us do that. It had to be more celebratory. And okay, let's dial it up and let's make it big. Which I think when you're casting around and developing a show and fitting it to a broadcast, so it goes through. You might find 3 or 4 broadcasters for whom it fits editorially and in terms of timing. And in the days of the being a schedule in the schedule, even fine. But then you will retune it specifically for them, for their voice, for what feels right to land it there. And I think with SVODs at the moment still, it doesn't feel right to me to be playing that slightly, straw on the floor note. It's kind of not what we want. If you turn on Amazon, Netflix, you want money on screen. And if you don't deliver it, it doesn't sit right, really, because the audience, I don't think anybody thinks it through that much. But I think inside they are crossing their arms and thinking, really? Not got much money to do it properly? Yeah, you have. Spend it. Show it to me.
Well, I mean, you could certainly see that. I mean, I was watching the final episode of season 3, where you announced to the audience there that was going to be the format change. Just going over that, I mean, and to your point about money on screen, some amazing cinematography there. It was just stunning, actually. that big format change, why was that?
Um, I think it's incredibly time consuming. It was all of our entire lives because fulfilling 10 shows, how many shows a year, as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, we'd literally raised the bar. We had to, in Top Gear 20 years ago, an individual film might be 7 minutes driving around the Cotswolds in a new hatchback. But now it had to be 15 minutes driving across Botswana. And therefore it became harder and harder to lift that, to keep that quality of film up at that level of intensity, all in a sort of magazine-y format.
Yeah,
And mostly because the reward for that, you do look closely at what people say and feel and like, and they loved the big specials. It was
yeah,
it was simply audience demand. They loved them, so we made those rather than try and keep doing something that didn't fit as well.
yeah.
Makes sense, really,
Well,
doesn't it? If people really
it
like them,
does.
we make
Absolutely, but I'm gonna miss the Conversation Street graphic in particular.
them. That was the best fun to take. I say a brand, our shtick that we'd been working together by then for 20 years. I mean, ridiculous, a long time anyway. Um, and to then have the chance at reinventing it. We wanted to do a news section. We couldn't call it the news because obviously there'd be
Yeah,
danger of being seen as trying to pass off, so we couldn't. But we wanted to have a talky bit, and I remember we said Conversation Street. I don't know why we thought of it, but that process of it was incredibly revitalizing for all of us. I mean, not just for us four, but for the whole team. It was really good fun to say, "Oh, how can we redo this? How can we do this differently? How can we do new stuff?" That was really good fun. And again, we were all very lucky to have the chance to do that.
yeah. Now, I can't interview you, Richard, without asking briefly about the crashes that you've had.
Yeah, my driving skills. Oops.
Yes. Well, firstly on Top Gear, and more recently the Rimac crash
Yeah,
in
did it
Switzerland.
again. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, on the
Oops.
Grand Tour. Yeah, I mean, did the last one have an impact in the direction of the Grand Tour in terms of the types of things that you're going to be
No,
doing? No?
no, no. I mean, it's neither did the first, really, in the sense that we've always. It's if you're in fast-moving things, there's an element of danger, and
Yeah.
there's an element of danger sitting on your sofa. And it's okay. When none of us go, oh, good risk assessments, unless that's your job, in which case enjoy it. But there is a reason, and perhaps we sharpened up after the first one. The second one, I mean, to be honest, it was largely my fault. I went over the line too fast and didn't lift. Um, Thankfully, again, this is down to the health and safety. The thing flew 300 feet and God knows how high and landed on his roof. And I was okay. I mean, I bust a leg and some bits and pieces, but I wasn't.
Hmm.
It wasn't as bad as it could have been, and that's because of the car. And we wouldn't have done that. It wouldn't have driven the car if it was dangerous and going to be,
Yeah, yeah,
it wasn't. It was incredibly safe. It saved my life when I crashed it off a mountain.
yeah,
Stupid.
yeah.
Yeah.
How is the knee, by the way?
It's all right. It's got big bits of metal in it. I can't run as often as I'd like to now. I sort of treat myself to a weekly big run, and then I go for a little trot around during the week. But if I
Right.
run it every day, it will wear out very quickly. It's
Yeah,
hanging on, still there. Hinges in the middle.
good.
Good for it.
So what's next for the Grand Tour? I mean, Elon Musk is obviously beaten you to sending a car in space.
Mhm.
What's the country that you've not been to that's got to be on the list? Got to be on the list for a special in the future.
I mean, I'm not going to name specific countries, but I mean, there's always our subject matter is subject to eternal change, particularly so at the moment. There's never been a more exciting time to look at the interface between cars and people and transport and travel because, wow, it's all going on.
Yeah,
So we're not going to run out of stuff to talk about and places to go. We really
yeah,
might
and
run out of
actually,
energy, but we're not going to run out of things and places to talk about.
yeah, and actually, that's something that has become a bit of a theme over the past few shows. Is asking. We've spoken to Ipsos Mori. We've spoken to various different distributors about what sort of demand they're going to be for programming they're going to see over 2021. And travel program is something that's, top of the list, really. It's like, everybody wants to be an armchair traveler at the moment. Once you've been stuck at home for a year, everybody wants to, see those places and plan for where they want to go. So I guess, it's
Yeah,
great that that's
I
part of
think
your format.
escape is a role TV can fulfill very well, always has, and right now it's very welcome. Yeah, I think escaping into an idea as well. I mean, you don't need to only escape from your sofa by looking at a white sandy beach and turquoise waters. You can also escape into concepts and minds and thoughts and ideas. But yeah, travel definitely there is an appetite for because
Yeah,
we all want to go somewhere, even if only on the telly. Mind
yeah.
you, it's not particularly easy going anywhere on the telly either at the moment. So that's
Yeah.
I mean, it's not been easy for the Grand Tour. The clue being in the word tour.
Yes. Yeah. Now, tell us about the production process for the Grand Tour. I mean, are you hands-on in development? And what about production? Where does I mean, you've been involved in production, as you said, right from the beginning of your career. Where does sort of your involvement in development stop and then sort of production start?
Well, don't forget, I'm in development. It's never going to be broader than the show because we're only developing for it. Only ever is going to make that one show, and therefore we're developing into that show, and that's a very collaborative process. I mean, I'll not lie, Jeremy is. I mean, it can be profoundly irritating in pretty much every way, but my God, the man is a source of ideas, as is the whole team. And so, yeah, it is a case of bowling in ideas and tearing them down, building them back up, and working them through. And it's quite a slick machine now. I mean, there are
Yeah.
in terms of logistics, I'm not going to interfere with that because there's some specialists in there now. They know what they're about. I found it a very um, brusque reminder setting up Chimp when I'm now working on shows outside of the Grand Tour. And you realize, oh, yes, there's a lot to do, isn't there? It's really
Yeah.
busy. It doesn't happen automatically.
No. So let's talk about Chimp. Now, that's your own production business that you run with your wife, Amanda, I believe.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, she's not particularly hands-on with it, but she'll tell me if something's rubbish.
Right.
But yeah,
Okay.
Chimp came about because it always lifelong dream, always wanted to, in an ideal world, build a sort of machine that you can potter up to having driven into work in the morning and drop an idea in a slot in the top, and something incredible comes out at the other end. It doesn't always work like that, but I've I love the business of making content, making programs, and I'm asked quite often, "Well, why are you doing that? You're a presenter." Well, hang on, yeah, and therefore I view myself as just one tool on the rack of tools involved in making content and getting it commissioned, getting it made, cut, distributed, and paid for. And that's whether you're a production manager, camera assistant, production lawyer, or presenter, you're one of the cogs in that big machine. And I've been doing it for 3 decades. So I'm very interested in that process and passionate about it. And I thought, well, if that's something I can leverage out of what success I've been lucky enough to enjoy as a presenter, then that's great news. So I've been focusing on doing that. It's been incredibly challenging. This wasn't the best year to do it as it transpired. A strange experience. I mean, the year before last, end of 2019, there were a lot of us, and we were making a big show for Amazon, a big show for Discovery. I could afford a sizable development team, but then very, very quickly along comes COVID and the general sort of I'm not shut down, but the sense of, well, wait a minute, if I commission that, you can be a lot of money into the spend on it and then not able to deliver the show, who's liable for that loss. And unfortunately for Chimp, we hadn't yet been able to build up that vault of IP that we could send out and sweat those assets when we're not in production. So when production shuts down, I'm keeping it going. So I've been very sensible and shrunk it back to the right size, but I've kept development in place. And we are rattling out great ideas. And I think we'll have benefited from it. We'll have leaned out as much as we can. We've stripped back to we are simply generating ideas in absolutely the right shape, targeted, and delivering them in the right form. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey to get here.
Yeah, and you're working with former Warner Brothers TV and Brave Bison CEO Claire Hungate.
Absolutely, yes.
She's advising the business.
She is.
So you've got a fantastic team in place.
Yeah, we have Erica Dodd in, who is my director of programs and who's dynamite. When she first joined, it was actually right. We're in the midst of these were big productions going out the door. So we were quite a big team, and we were dealing with sizable sizable production company issues, and it all gets complicated sometimes. And she just sat me down and said, "Richard, really, it distills down to come up with a great idea, ideally targeted somewhere, take it there, make sure it fits." Get it commissioned, make it really, really well, ideally for a bit less than you got paid to make it, and then you're in business. Oh yeah, actually, we can forget that it's there is that element to it, and I really appreciate her reminding me of that sometimes when I get caught up in the other stuff, and you think, well, hang on, no, it is still about the idea of let's get some amazing ideas together and get paid slightly more to make them than it costs us. And then we can afford a big development team to come up with the next one and the next one.
Yeah. And now you don't have to make shows for Amazon, right? You're making shows. You mentioned you're making shows for Discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Whoever. I mean, we talk a lot to US networks constantly. Well, I don't want to curse anything, but there's things moving closer with networks over there and here in the UK. No, we're open for business anywhere, and that's kind of useful. And also, what I can contribute to the business. I mean, I'm not a businessman. I'm not a charismatic and talented MD. I'm not much use really. The most use I can be is, I suppose, a sort of creative director role, but also actually hosting stuff to get us moving. Because I know we can open doors to the odd broadcaster and say, hello, it's me. I really like to make this, and I really want to make it with these guys that I came up with it with. But the aim for Chimp is to be making stuff, obviously not for me. I brought an old friend, Tori Belleci, into a show we've just delivered to Amazon, Great Escapists. And I just adore the guy, and he's fabulous on screen. He's so warm and relatable, but also his passion for his subject, engineering, building, is incredibly genuine. He started as a builder on Mythbusters. He was making stuff off set and gradually became on screen. He is the real deal. And I'd love to make shows for him. That would be the next phase for me. Ideally, I'd like to go out maybe on one show a year for Chimp, because it's what I do, but then really have Chimp making stuff with other people fronting it.
Right, with other talent. So
yeah. Oh, very, very much so. Yeah. That's when I know we've succeeded.
So could we see you making shows for the BBC, do you think?
Yeah,
or Netflix?
Yeah. I mean, there are no holdbacks on us, but I'd love to get some stuff away in the UK. Not only because, obviously, as a UK indie, you really need those jobs where you can build up that vault of IP that you can send out to work for you when times are like 2020 was. But also, I think typically the US networks, and certainly the SVODs, where it is work for hire, but they pay well. And you get to experiment with bigger, bolder ideas. You know, we delivered The Great Escapists. That was not an inexpensive show, and we did that all on our little selves. And it's really important to be able to say, yeah, we can handle a budget, we can handle the sort of infrastructure and the backup, the business structure behind that, and that's really important. So yeah, we will continue to advance on all fronts. I'd also, just as a broadcaster, I'd love to do some stuff in my home country. Again, I'd like to be on terrestrial in the UK, and then see Chimp's little logo at the end of it.
So now it's the time in the show where my guests get to choose their TV industry story of the week over the past 7 days. Richard, what's your story of the week?
I'm very interested in Disney. Is it 95 million subscriptions they've now hit, which is significant, but also speaks to that kind of growing wave of SVODs coming at us. And important to whilst that wave happens, find ways of surfing it. I think it's really important as an indie to think, right, well, yeah, okay, there's not going to be the advantages of retaining ownership. The rights issues are going to be more complicated, but they've got big budgets and you can make huge projects for them. And I think as well, more of those breakout shows are going to happen, those ones that break out from the confines of that. I think it's also slowly blurring that brief division of viewers, a younger generation for whom the idea of scheduling what? I just watch what somebody wants me to watch at a given moment. Why would I do that? I want to watch what I want to watch when I want to watch it. But I think as that intensifies and grows and they do break out, I think that will always leave space for the schedules, because we'll always want those shared broadcasting experiences. I will always want to turn on something sometimes and watch it knowing that a lot of other people I know are going to be watching it simultaneously, because then you get those shared reactions. You might not find it funny, but I know my Auntie Beryl will find it extremely offensive, so I'm going to laugh at it. So I think it's an exciting story more than anything else.
Yeah. And now it's that time in the show where my guests get to nominate their hero of the week and who or what they're telling to get in the bin. Richard, who's your hero of the week?
Well, the thing is, can I have the same thing for both?
Yeah, why not?
Right. I'm going to say Clubhouse, because it is very exciting. And I got invited, and ooh, and all you hear is how special people are when they're on it. And, oh, this is it. Oh, it's going to be me and Elon, my mate. We're going to be hanging out, just chatting on
Talking Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, it's going to be brilliant. I can't wait. So I was, it was a hero of the week at that point. Oh, this is I've made it. I'm going to be on there with all the big execs, pitching my shows, selling my business. Here I go. And then I went on, and then this is where it goes the other way a little bit. Because basically, I swagger into Clubhouse thinking, right, where's Elon and everybody else? And then all of a sudden, I am reduced to the scruffy little brummie that I am, just scuffling about all these rooms, hearing people talk. I'm like, well, what do you? I don't want to go in there. What if I have to say something? And they're all talking about Silicon Valley stuff and Bitcoin and really scary. Oh, I'll bail out. I've been in several times since and had a mooch about. And then I realised that when you're in a room, your name's on the list. People can see you're in there. And then if anybody, I mean, fine, if they don't recognize your name, that's brilliant. But if God forbid somebody did see, wait a minute, is that little, why has he been so quiet? I'm terrified of it. So I ran out.
And you have to raise your hand, don't you?
Oh, God. And then, I ran out again. So I'm doing both with Clubhouse, if that's all right.
Yeah,
Hero, very exciting. Wow, new type of social media. I think the idea of it being speech rather than imagery or written word, fantastic. That could be revelatory. That could be really freeing for ideas. We'll then get into a freedom of speech argument. But let's assume that people can share ideas on there. Brilliant. But then the actual practicalities of going in and doing it when you've convinced yourself everybody else in the room is basically a T-Rex in a suit. I'm terrified of it. So it's fulfilling both purposes.
All right, absolutely. Well, it is pretty weird. I have to say, when I've been in there, I've done exactly the same. Gone in and
scurried out.
I just, yeah. I mean, but Twitter are going to be launching their competitive product to Clubhouse sometime soon.
There we go.
We can do the same thing in Twitter. But
in and run out.
Richard, thank you so much for coming on TellyCast this week. It's been brilliant talking to you. Best of luck with Chimp Productions, and look forward to seeing you very soon.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for having me on. Absolute pleasure. Nice to talk to you. Good luck to you.